All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Great River Arts February 1st edition of our open mic night. I think we'll start off the night with the return of Pamela Walters.
Well, good evening. It is miserable outside, absolutely awful. I told somebody if I wasn't so dedicated to doing this and to having the opportunity to get my stuff out, I wouldn't leave the house. But thanks for coming. I like to read to you things that I know that all my humorous poems are well received, and they are a lot of fun to listen to. But I also write some pretty serious stuff too. And I've had a conversation with some people about what constitutes good poetry. It's really, really hard to define, isn't it? If I was to read some of my things to you, some of you would say that was really good. If I was to read it to a poetry critic, they may say that is total amateurism. And I don't know what to think. And maybe we aren't the people who can evaluate our own stuff, are we? But anyway, it gives me great pleasure to do it, and it's important to express what I'm really thinking and feeling. So one of those is called Moving Beyond. All of us in this room have moved beyond something to move into another phase of our lives. Sometimes we want to relive those times. Sometimes we'd rather escape from them. No matter what our feelings are, we cannot return to the past. The older you get, the more you have to reflect upon. So this is called Moving Beyond. This is my most recent poem. Children dash to the school bus and scramble aboard. They slide into slippery, hard seats, assess the assortment of heads in front of them, stumble to find their places, play games to while away the time, sing songs, read their library books, giggle over whispered secrets, shout over the din of other shrill voices, ignore the rattle of the bus, hide their candy, check their school lunch. I have moved beyond that. Adolescent pangs and joys intermingle to form a high-intensity brew, a searing crush over a schoolmate, a disagreement with your best friend, tedious classroom lectures, hurried note-taking, hours of studying, high school dances blending pleasure and pain into indelible memories, a whirlwind of activities, endless schoolwork, family outings, parties and sleepovers, late nights and bleary-eyed mornings. Life is good if you exclude the times that it hurts too much. I've moved beyond that. Young adulthood, desperate agonies of loneliness, feelings of being misunderstood, ignored, invisible to your peers, wild moments of abandonment amongst those who accept you, a fresh and inviting sense of adventure, a belief in endless possibilities, laughter amidst forested hills and streams, frolics in the open meadows, repressed thoughts of considering what it all means, the hopeful anticipation of the future, the dread of the abyss, of the unknown. I have moved beyond that. Released into the working world, confident but fearful of inadequacy, confused at opposing opinions, baffled by unexpected challenges, hampered in efforts to meet souls in harmony with your soul, sometimes finding what you seek, often not. Long hours of work, solitary nights, pacified by sounds of electronic background noise and stale pizzas. Wondering when life will even out, when life will feel fulfilling, if you will finally arrive at where you were meant to be. I have moved beyond that. The years of marriage, the trials and rewards of family life, the freedom of the empty nest, the habitual routine of occupations and vacations and occasional entertainments. Life becomes a joyride in a car with the windows and top down, coasting along the open road through life's familiar landscape, too occupied with the present moment to think of what lies ahead. I've moved beyond that. The years of recovery from deaths that altered my life, the conclusion to a profession carried out with faithfulness to the end, the psychological effect of all those untouched opportunities, the disappointments, successes, accomplishments, and finalities, the accumulating layers of many final endings combined to form the leaves of the book of memory, its pages turned over and read with such repetition until the memory is what has been memorized. I sit at a table gazing out the window, wondering how far I have taken the act of moving beyond. A hardened remaining layer of frozen snow casts blue shadows and circles the leafless dormant trees. Like the daughter of Jairus, They are not dead, but only sleeping. Death and endings can freeze your soul to below zero. Death and endings have a way of slamming doors shut. But there are more doors remaining that one could choose to open if you had the motivation, if you had the courage, if you had the faith. The alternative is certain stagnation and death. Wisdom knows what she needs to do to move beyond, as well as a resolve to do it while there's still time. My sister and her husband came to visit, and they came to actually stay overnight. Now, that is a very rare thing to happen at my house. I have dogs and cats. It says most of the time no one enters my house except one human, 2 dogs, and 2 cats. But on those rare occasions when people come to visit, I expect my house to be in shape. Only a few events have the power to launch some of us into full speed ahead house cleaning. Many have the desire but lack the time. Many have the time but lack the desire. Desire activates when placed on the front burner of necessity. When anticipating company, particularly overnight guests, or rare urges grip the focus of the mind and the energy of the body to engage in a high-gear activity that becomes a race if hospitality is avoided falling completely on its face, a victim of neglect, your reputation a disgrace. By company, it's most commonly understood to include certain persons on your private list. If you live alone, it might mean that everyone is on your list. If you don't, it probably means that your list differs from others in your household with contrary opinions. Whether priest or pastor, outlaws or in-laws, former classmates not seen in decades, business associates, the affluent with homes more upscale than yours, the pleasant, the engaging, the insufferable bores. The arrival of company denotes exhausting chores. Change the cat litter box, top it off with more sand, dust the bookshelves and dresser, arrange the TV stand, strip the beds, wash the sheets, rush off to the laundromat. Don't dare look in that closet. Brush the door, shoo the cat, wash the floors, get the vacuum, scrape that crud off the floor, file or gather the papers, toss the bills in a drawer, rearrange chairs and sofa, take great pains to display that distasteful blue vase they gave you last holiday. Scrub with toilet bowl cleaner, pull the weeds, mow the lawn. On the day of arrival, smile and rise with the dawn. Breathe a sigh of relief when your company is gone. This is about a meditation on a starry night by Vincent van Gogh. In one of the meetings of the Heartland Poets, mention was made of an exercise to write a poem in coinciding with an example of visual art. After studying a book about Impressionist painters, I decided to reflect on Van Gogh's masterpiece, The Starry Night. And I hope that most of you know what it looks like. The aquamarines and cerulean blues churn and roll, spanning the deep and dark expanse of the midnight sky. The brush strokes of color swim and swirl in improvisational dance. In the midst of the canvas, the clouds tumble, intermingled streams of gold, white, and blue, shimmering in waves like acrobats performing somersaults. A stigmatic vision distorts the stars as balls of golden fireworks, puffs of celebratory explosions, light years in distance, hovering beyond mortal's reach, yet caressing and imminent. A quarter moon reclines in the sky, a golden orb lounging on a divan, surrounded by a halo of light emitting an illumined aura. Sloping hills roll downward, frothy waves touching the shoreline, licking the outskirts of the recumbent village slumbering in the valley. One lone cypress sports brick-red highlights in its verdant green hair. United in spirit with the church steeple, they stretch vertically upward, offering a unified worship to the creator of this nocturne. Peace and wonder assume their thrones in the splendor of this night, governed by the clockwise rotation of time which orders all things. Darkness revolving to light, seasons unfolding to their successive sisters, years rolling into decades, decades mounting into spans of centuries, centuries collecting into millenniums, millenniums aggregating into clumps comprising the sum of history. Life terminates with death. Death is conquered by resurrection. There's too much wonder and sublime genius on display for the human soul to dispassionately dissect. Under the breath of canopy on such a starry night as this, the only appropriate response left to the human soul is to kneel in adoration, bend in reverent submission, and allow its beauty to slay you. To love like Brahms. One afternoon, I put a CD of Brahms' Second Symphony on and immediately recalled the impressions I had as a young college music major that came from listening to romantic music. Composers of the mid to late 1800s were seeking to express the inexpressible, were desirous to obtain the unobtainable. Love was often depicted as being the highest level of glory or a passion impossible to fulfill. Despite references to musical terms and artists you may not be familiar with, I hope you can understand the basic point of the poem. If not, just listen to the first movement of Brahms' Second Symphony. I'll give you something to look up on the internet. To love like Brahms and the other romantics is to ache and to long for what you cannot attain, is to write crescendos of passion, appoggiaturas, extending, reaching up for the ultimate resolution just beyond reach, is to tenaciously cling to the high note, loath to let go, to eventually succumb to the sinking fate of the inevitable. To love like Brahms and the other romantics is to love what rightly belongs to another, to depart to a varied tune, to pursue a detouring melody, to attempt self-medication to soothe your aching desire, to seek a momentary reprieve, a retreat to calm equanimity. But alluring obsession persists in gazing at the image of longing. The theme musters its strength, grandiose in its glory, that love theme in which intuition whispers it lies not in the stars. The music must soar, ascend, climb, and sink into eventual finality. Fate rules the decrescendo. Circumstance hastens to the coda. To love like Brahms and the other romantics is to feel glory's invasion fill the breast with pure joy, is to touch bluest heaven before plummeting like Icarus, is why Brahms' sense of loyalty could never woo Clara, why Cezanne, gripped by defeat, abandoned his paintings, why Tristan and Isolde chose death together in order to be united, why demons of mockery rack the souls of great artists, why melodies formulate, sail, and soar to be pierced by silence. To love like Brahms and the other romantics is to enter a realm of dreams, though centuries must pass, to die and experience dying 1,000 deaths with no regrets. It is more sublime to give way to becoming a romantic. It's less painful to settle for being a realist.
All right, another hand for Pamela, everybody. So if you'll forgive me for just a couple minutes, I think I'm going to be number 2, so it means I just got to rearrange some stuff on the stage. I guess I'll start off with just a song I've probably done too many times already, but it's an old traditional seafaring piece. It's called Captain Thompson. It's back when sea voyages were a little more commonplace. This is a story about basically an immigrant song, somebody immigrating to Canada, actually, and telling about this near-fatal trip they had. It's called Captain Thompson. How's it go? My mind being much inclined to cross the raging main, I left my aging parents in sorrow, grief, and pain. On board the Fame we thus became as passengers to be, along with Captain Thompson in this land of liberty. were swiftly sailing around the place they call Newfoundland. The wind went dead ahead of us, and our ship was at a stand. All hands on deck, brave Thompson cried, or we'll be cast away. We'll boldly stand, or we'll never land on the shores of America. Mountain of ice came shearing down abreast our lofty main. But the God of mercy, he was kind, and our lives he did maintain. Our gallant crew they hauled about, and so our ship was saved. But we were doomed to be entombed all in a watery grave. So here's a health to Captain Thompson, likewise our gallant crew, who boldly faced those stormy winds and saw our vessel through. But wet and weary, sad and dreary, they boldly faced our death. Tack on tack they worked in shore till we landed in New York. Safely landed, our courage it did renew. But how could I sleep easy, dear Aaron, so far from you? I hope the time will come once more when our families will see we live together peacefully in this land of liberty. Yeah, it's a traditional song, and I usually like doing that kind of stuff. I've studied a lot of traditional kind of cultural stuff like that, and those are fun because you usually start out with just a bunch of words that have been, that are probably 2 centuries old, and you just kind of get to do whatever. You can take a major and make it minor. You can take a minor, make it major. You can take a jig and turn it into a reel, if that makes sense to anyone out there. You can really personalize that music, and there's no copyrights to worry about. Having said that, I'm going to do a little song. When I was like probably 15 or 16 and just learning how to like play guitar, there was this Minneapolis band. I'm actually from like southwestern Wisconsin, but there was this Minneapolis band that was one of the first bands I really got into. I don't know if I doubt anybody knows them. They're Boiled in Lead is the name. They've gone through like lots of phases, lots of incarnations, lots of personnel. I caught them in the 90s when they all had long hair and beards and stuff, and they had kind of an 80s incarnation, a 90s, and I think they've had 2 or 3 since then. Haven't really followed, but this is a song. It's called Hide My Track. It's from an album. They put out an album that was apparently a soundtrack to a book, to a novel. I never read the novel, but it sounds interesting because I like the album a great deal. And it was an entirely, I think, acoustic album. Really, really absolutely fell in love with this track, and I finally had the chance to see him live, and they played it super fast and super electric and super loud, and it was just a completely different experience. But I tuned my guitar quick here. You know what? I think I'm gonna grab shot. This song's got some space to fill, so maybe this will help. How do you use something like that, maybe? Anyway, okay, the song's called Hide My Track. I got no home I can go back to. I got no one to call my friend. I can't find the place I started, and I can only guess how it will end. So keep them hounds off my trail, these jailers off my back. Get these bracelets off of me. Need a little rain to hide my track. There's no whiskey in the jar, and I'm so dry, I need a drink. I need a place to lay my head down, and I need to find some time to think. So keep my hounds off my trail, these jailers off my back. Get these bracelets off of me. The rain to hide my track. That old river, it keeps on rolling, and old Hannah, it won't go down. I can't give back what I ain't taken, and I won't give up if I ain't found. And I have nothing that I can offer. I'm like a dog without a bone. But if there's someone up there listening, just tell them there's a poor boy out here alone. So keep them hounds off my trail, these jailers off my back. Get these bracelets off of me. Need a little rain to hide my track. Off my trail, the jailers off my back. Get these bracelets off of me. Need a little rain to hide my track. Like I say, man, that was a song I learned when I was 15, so that's like 20 years ago, man. It's a little rusty, but yeah. I'm going to move some of this off to the side of the stage, and I think we will welcome next Luke Green to do some comedy.
Good evening. This is kind of a, going through the different phases of life, as was talked about with Pamela's wonderful pieces. Thank you for the wonderful music. I am a huge fan of 90s covers. My name is Luke Green. Usually when I'm doing comedy, I go by Greg from St. Cloud, but much like in coffee houses, you kind of cut away all the electrics, go down to the stripped-down acoustic version. We can just be on a first-name basis. From Sartell, Minnesota. My wife is a drug dealer up here. She requests that I call her a pharmacist, but it is what it is. So she works in town, lovely community. Why I am actually in attendance tonight, I have to give a shout out to Mary Schmidt. She used to be very involved, I know, in kind of the arts area in Little Falls, and so she suggested I come up here. And so one of the New Year's resolutions I've been trying to do is to get out more, kind of experience local arts, and so this is kind of the culmination of that. A lot of new faces too. I've always loved meeting new people. Stranger danger wasn't something that my parents taught me. Instead, my dad had kind of the mantra that strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. And my mom wasn't too keen about this advice, but I remember it, and I think it's important because it's one of the only memories I have left of my dad. Because when I was 6, a stranger kidnapped me. But it wasn't that bad. My dad was totally right. We started as strangers, but soon Daryl and I became really good friends. And he taught me a lot of cool stuff, that a 6-year-old should know. He taught me how to play the game Duck, Duck, Grey Duck, which is good because if he was truly a monster, he would have taught me like deranged and appropriate games to teach a 6-year-old, like Duck, Duck, Goose. Minnesota joke. So Duck, Duck, Grey Duck's a great game. It teaches kids everything they need to know about life. It teaches them about colors and numbers and how to turn a friendly game into something that's unnecessarily competitive. That Daryl. One day, Daryl and I were actually fishing, and that goofball, he accidentally knocked me over the side of the boat, and then thought it would be funny to drive away in the boat and leave me there. And he's not very good at playing pranks because he wasn't able to find his way back to me. So I tread water for a little bit, and then I eventually swam to shore, and it kind of sucked because I never saw Daryl again. But it was all right. I got to meet a lot of new cool friends at the police station. However, I didn't like these new friends very much. They kept trying to tell me that Daryl gave me something called Stockholm Syndrome, which I'm pretty sure isn't true because Daryl never took me to Sweden. To his credit, though, he did take me to an IKEA once. And while I was at IKEA, I loved the place, got to go in all of the different rooms and pick stuff out, and I picked up an item called a Skurfblurgen, and I didn't know that I would be responsible for setting it up because it was my first time at IKEA. But when I got home, it took me a little bit of time to put it together, but between the time it took to set this thing up and the extra space it gave my room, I had completely forgot about the fact that I was locked in a linen closet. Yeah. I learned something new the other day. If you've ever heard the phrase, to use your noodle, it means to use your brain. Because prior to this, I thought it meant a different part of my body. And to my credit, I didn't have a father in my life teaching me, that noodle means brain. And school was hard for me. Do you know how difficult it is to do long division using just your wiener? Multiply, on the other hand, that I can do. Was in Target the other day with my wife, and as bored husbands do, I just kind of made an offhand comment that I thought was just to myself. And I said, I'm happy Christmas is over. And there's a lady who was walking the opposite direction. She had the cart, she's talking on her cell phone, the whole 9 yards. And she thought this would be a great opportunity to weigh in on our conversation. And I'm not opposed to conversation with strangers. I welcome it. And she looked at me right in the eye and she said, you are such a Scrooge. I looked back at her. I said, Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge. The guy who, in the book, learns his lesson, changes his ways, and becomes the most charitable guy in the entire city. I'm him? Ugh, whatever. You're a Grinch. So again, I thought about it, and I asked her, the Grinch. The guy who, rightfully so, he made some mistakes when it comes to Christmas, but he learned his lesson. His heart grew 3 times just to fit the amount of Christmas spirit that he has. I'm him? Ugh, whatever. You are rude. And it kind of got me thinking, how messed up is it that we use Grinch and Scrooge to kind of describe the worst of those when it comes to Christmas? If we did that with other stories, it would look kind of silly that we completely forget the purpose of the story itself, or perhaps the important ending that defines it. So again, if we applied this to other things, and we're talking about transport, if you want to get across the Atlantic, you should take the Hindenburg. Or if we're talking about, movies, if we forget the purpose of the story and do the exact opposite, if you're looking for an uplifting family classic, look no further than Schindler's List. Went to Olive Garden the other day, and I love Olive Garden because Olive Garden is a good place to go when you're married and you want to go somewhere and think it's an important date. And so I expected it just to be me and my wife sitting at the table, but when our host took us over to our table and sat us down, he informed us that we would be dining with a third party. And that would be a little computer on our table that you can order drinks, order food, those sorts of things. And it was kind of weird because I thought, it'd just be a great moment for me and my wife to get away. But on this thing, there was a camera in it. And I'm not really sure why they need a robot computer thingy with a camera in it. But it makes their slogan make a little bit more sense. Olive Garden, when you're here, your family is probably being surveilled. The other weird thing that they had on it was there was this call server button, and I really wanted to push it throughout the entire meal, just kind of curious how it would work. Would I hit it and an alarm would go off and back, or what happens once you hit the call server button? And my wife kept kind of batting my hand away whenever I tried to push it. But thankfully, a guy sitting a couple tables over must have successfully pressed the button, because his device started flashing like a Christmas tree, just this bright red light, and you really can't argue with the results, because it let the server know, it let the rest of the restaurant know that the guy sitting at table 16 is a really impatient jerk. And after we had eaten our meal and paid, we actually had to walk by table 16. And my wife, she just kind of looked the other way and booked it right out to the exit. But when I was walking by the table, the guy reached out and grabbed my arm. And I turned around and looked at him, and I said, "Honey, get back here. You have to meet my old friend Daryl." Thank you very much.
All right, let's give Luke a hand, everybody. Always great to have some comedy up here. That's great stuff. Okay, so I think now we're gonna keep going with some of the spoken word type genre stuff. And since Patricia hasn't learned any words yet, she's not going to participate in this part of the show. I think we'll leave that up to Jonathan Wickman.
I think I'll sit. I don't know why I'm telling you while I'm doing it. You can see what I'm doing. Or it's like, do I want your feedback? Do I want, what do you guys think I should do? Should I sit or stand or what? The thought that's coming to mind right now is how when I grew up, my dad would often say that the two greatest fears of people are the fear of falling and the fear of public speaking. So here we are, all of us facing our fears. Good job, everybody. Yes. And I think about it a lot. I mean, it's like, because if you're standing in front of people and you're talking, you can't tell if someone's going to throw something at you, if someone's making a crazy face, if someone's sneaking up behind you. So I guess it makes a lot of sense. So, yes, I am a person named Jonathan, as introduced by Matt. Woo. Thanks. I laugh self-deprecatingly a lot. Other things about me, I live in Little Falls, and I have a relationship with poetry. It's not unlike being an alcoholic, so I just feel a little confessional as I'm talking to you about it. I'm like, I've tried to stop. I can't stop. Right now I'm off the wagon. Here we are. So, Patricia's set reminded me, or the first poem that she read, I think it was about Beyond. What? Pamela. Why do I think your name is Patricia? Because that's Patricia. I've confused you with someone else. Okay. Also this week I met a piece of artwork named Patricia. Random fact. Okay, so let's see. I'm just getting a sense here, like I'm gonna jump off a cliff. So this is a book called A School for Fools, and it's by a Russian guy named Sasha Sokolov. And I first read it in a different translation, but this is translated by Alexander Boguslavsky. And here's one paragraph of it. I remember I noticed someone's dacha and thought, here's a dacha. It has 2 stories. Some family lives there. Some members of the family live here the entire week, and some only on Saturdays and Sundays. Then I saw a little 2-wheeled cart that stood on the edge of the grove next to the haystack. And I said to myself, now that's a cart. One can carry various things in it. For instance, earth, gravel, luggage, pencils from the Sacco and Vanzetti factory, wild honey, the fruit of mango trees, ice picks, ivory knickknacks, roof shingles, collected works, cages with rabbits, ballot boxes and mailboxes, feather beds and their opposites, cannonballs, stolen sinks, tables of ranks, and objects from the period of the Paris Commune. And now someone will come and start hauling hay in the cart. The cart is very handy. I saw a little girl leading a dog on a leash, an ordinary, simple dog, going in the direction of the station. I knew the girl was going to the pond now. She'd bathe herself and her simple dog, and after that a certain number of years would pass. The girl would grow up and begin to live a grown-up life. She'd get married, read serious books, hurry and be late for work, buy furniture, talk on the phone for hours, wash socks, prepare food for herself and others, go visiting and get drunk on wine, be jealous of her neighbors and the birds, follow the weather forecasts, dust, count her kopecks, await a child, go to the dentist, take shoes to be fixed, appeal to men, look through the window at the cars passing by, go to concerts and museums, laugh when it wasn't funny, turn red when ashamed, cry whenever she felt like crying, scream from pain, moan under the touch of her lover, gradually turn gray, color her eyelashes and hair, wash her hands before dinner and feet before bed, pay dues, acknowledge delivery of packages, flip through magazines, meet old acquaintances on the street, participate in meetings, bury relatives, bang pots and pans in the kitchen, try to smoke, tell the plots of films, be insubordinate in front of bosses, complain about that migraine again, go to the country and pick some mushrooms, cheat on her husband, run from shop to shop, watch fireworks, love Chopin, babble, be afraid to gain weight, dream about a trip abroad, think about suicide, curse broken elevators, save for an emergency, sing romances, await a child, preserve old photographs, advance in her career, squeal from fright, shake her head disapprovingly, complain about unending rains, miss the lost things, listen to the news on the radio, catch taxis, go to the south, bring up the children, stand in lines for hours, inevitably get older, dress according to the latest fashion, curse the government, live by inertia, take drops for her heart, curse her husband, go on a diet, leave and come back, use lipstick, wish for nothing more, visit her parents, think everything was over, and also that corduroy, cotton, linen, silk, velvet, wool, was very practical. Stay home on silk leave, lie to her girlfriends and relatives, forget about everything in the world, borrow money, live the way everyone lives, and recall the dacha, the pond, and her simple dog. I saw a pine tree, singed by lightning. It had yellow needles. I imagined a stormy night in July. At first it was quiet and humid in the settlement, and all residents slept with their windows open. Then a cloud stealthily appeared. It covered the stars and brought the wind. The wind blew, and all over the settlement window shutters and doors slammed and the broken glass tinkled. Afterward, in complete darkness, the rain began to pound. It drenched the roofs, gardens, beach chairs left in the gardens, mattresses, hammocks, sheets, children's toys, primers, and everything else. People in the dachas woke up. They turned on, but at once turned off the lights, paced around their rooms, looked through windows, and said to each other, "What a storm, what a downpour." The lightning bolts kept striking. Apples kept ripening and falling on the grass. One lightning bolt struck quite close. Nobody knew where exactly, but they agreed that it was somewhere in the settlement. And those who did not have lightning rods on their roofs promised themselves to put them up no later than tomorrow. However, the lightning bolt hit the pine tree that stood at the edge of the forest, but it did not burn it down, just singed it, illuminating at the same time the entire forest, settlement, station, and a section of the railroad branch. The lightning bolt blinded the running trains, covered the rails with silver, and painted the ties white. And then, oh, I know, then you saw the house in which that woman lived. You left the bicycle by the fence and knocked on the gate. "Knock, knock, my dear, knock, knock. I came to you, your shy one, your tender one. Open and let me in. Open and let me in. I don't want anything from you. I'll just take a look at you and leave. Don't chase me away. Only don't chase me, my dear. I'm thinking about you. I'm crying and praying for you." That was one paragraph of A School for Fools. I like those kinds of books. Let's see. Okay, here's something that I really don't often do. Promotion. Which is just spreading the word, right? So I am teaching, leading, sponsoring, I don't know, a class called Writing Inspired by Art, and I put some flyers out there. It's going to happen here because there's art here, so we can be inspired by it. And it'll just be some writing, Tuesday, February 20th, $10, hour and a half, 6 to 7:30 p.m. This is not a poem, but I wish it were. Yeah, please join me if you feel like it. It would be an honor to have you. So, okay. Here is a brief blog post that does relate to poetry. It's called All the Brass Awkwards. A while back, I was walking out of a grocery co-op in Berkeley when I saw a dude with a little typewriter in his lap and a cardboard and marker sign that read, "Poems about anything." I moseyed over to see what was up. He was writing a poem for a gaggle of girls who looked on smiling as he joked with them and pecked away at a tiny scrap of paper, adjusting the scrap with his fingers when he ran out of space, which happened about every 4 words. I said I'd be interested in a poem and hung out while he pecked, looked around, and said hi to scruffy hipster types, Pac-Man and Mouth, and called Poems About Anything. "Would you like a poem today?" to the passing grocery shoppers. My poem was about trombones. Here it is. The most awkward and forgotten of all the brass awkwards, ska band, and 1990-something means we are participating in a culture larger, bigger than we are, and back when instruments were expensive and strictly for the upper crust, or those who serve at their behest, and since then, as pleasure has become less of a what we make of it and more of a pervasive state, maybe the non-electric Audiblast trombone makes a comeback, for its ability to slide from sound to sound, like situational ethics and classical music needing modern relevance, so rich people give free sound to willing participants. My friend Jen, who's a new music composer, had been having an existential crisis about the relevance of new music in the modern world. New music being like classical, instrumental, classical type stuff that's not classical, I guess. So this was surprisingly apropos. I mentioned this, and the poem dude said that noise music drew a solid following of punk kids, that there are indeed people out there who are interested in wild new music. I gave him $1 for the poem. Then he was off with his little avocado-colored typewriter, cardigan sweater, and orange beard to try his luck in Rockville. "I'll see you again," he said. He was a cool guy. The poem's about anything, dude. All right. Oh, goodness. Okay. Oh, gosh. All right, I think I'll read a poem, I'll do a promotion, then maybe I'll read one more poem, and then I'll be done. This is an interesting poem that you may or may not find interesting. It is interesting to me. And it's as close as I get to like anything that's not PG-13. All right, here we go. Alive for an Instant by Kenneth Cook. I have a bird in my head, and a pig in my stomach, and a flower in my genitals, and a tiger in my genitals, and a lion in my genitals, and I am after you. But I have a song in my heart, and my song is a dove. I have a man in my hands, I have a woman in my shoes. I have a landmark decision in my reason. I have a death rattle in my nose. I have summer in my brain water. This is the matter with me and the hammer of my mother and father who created me with everything. But I lack calm, I lack rose. Though I do not lack extreme delicacy of rose petal, who is it that I wish to astonish? In the bird call I found a reminder of you, but it was thin and brittle and gone in an instant. Has nature set out to be a great entertainer? Obviously not. A great reproducer? A great nothing? Well, I will leave that up to you. I have a knocking woodpecker in my heart, and I think I have 3 souls, one for love, one for poetry, and one for acting out my insane self. Not insane, but boring, but perpendicular, but untrue, but true. The 3 rarely sing together. Take my hand, it's active. The active ingredient in it is a touch. I am Lord Byron, I am Percy Shelley, I am Ariosto, I eat the bacon, I went down the slide, I have a thunderstorm in my inside, I will never hate you. But how can this maelstrom be appealing? Do you like menageries? My God, most people want a man. So here I am. I have a pheasant in my reminders, I have a goshawk in my clouds. Whatever is it that has led all these animals to you? A resurrection, or maybe an insurrection, an inspiration? I have a baby in my landscape, and I have a wild rat in my secrets from you. Thank you. All right, so what did I say? Promotion, poem. I feel like I'm substitute teaching. I do that sometimes, and I'll get all nervous, and I'll be like, okay, people, this is what's going to happen. We're here. We're going to take attendance. We're going to do some stuff. Then we're going to leave. How does that sound? They're usually like, okay, yeah, all right. We can get on board with that. Okay, promotion number 2. I am excited to be practicing promotion. So there's a new art studio in town. It's over on First Avenue, right over there, by Tony's Custom Framing. And it's run by a person named Heidi Jube, and she's sort of catalyzed a art crawl thing that's not really an art crawl, but it's got Great River Arts on board, and it's got Zoomski's Midtown Cafe, and it's got Tony's Custom Framing. So there's going to be a bunch of art around from all over the place, February 16th through 18th. And that's in a couple weeks, that's on the weekend. And why am I promoting it? Well, partly because there's going to be a poetry open mic here, and also there. And I invite anybody to come. Obviously, I invite Pamela to come. But just because she's reading poetry up here doesn't mean she's the only poet, nor am I. Like I said, it's kind of like being an alcoholic. You don't always want to tell people that you write poetry, but maybe you do, and maybe you want to read it. Maybe you want to confess your poetry. So let me know if you do. Email me or just show up. That works too. It's in the afternoon on February 17th at 2 p.m. It will also be my birthday. Thank you. So, as my present to you, you should come. Or something. Okay, cool. So, what's the last poem? That's the question. Perfect, okay. All right, this one's called Oranges. And it's all vaguely related to Valentine's Day. I thought I'd try to do kind of a seasonal thing. Love. Wait a minute. Do I want to read this poem, or do I want to read the poem that's in my head? Good question. Does anybody have a preference for memorized versus paper? Memorized? Can I get it? Okay, yes. Or both. Okay. This is called The Orange, and it's by Wendy Cope. At lunchtime, I bought a huge orange. The size of it made us all laugh. I peeled it and shared it with Robert and Dave. They got quarters, and I got a half. And that orange, it made me so happy, as ordinary things often do. Just lately, the shopping, a walk in the park. This is peace and contentment. It's new. The rest of the day was quite easy. I did all the jobs on my list and enjoyed them and had some time over. I love you. I'm glad I exist. Thank you and adieu. Thanks again for you. One more poem? Okay, this one's called Oranges. And it's by Gary Soto. The first time I walked with a girl, I was 12, cold and weighted down with 2 oranges in my jacket. December, frost cracking beneath my steps, my breath before me, then gone, as I walked toward her house, the one whose porch light burned yellow, night and day, in any weather. A dog barked at me until she came out pulling at her gloves, face bright with rouge. I smiled, touched her shoulder, and led her down the street, across a used car lot and a line of newly planted trees until we were breathing before a drugstore. We entered, the tiny bell bringing a sales lady down a narrow aisle of goods. I turned to the candies, tiered like bleachers, and asked what she wanted. Light in her eyes, a smile starting at the corners of her mouth. I fingered a nickel in my pocket, and when she lifted a chocolate that cost a dime, I didn't say anything. I took the nickel from my pocket, then an orange, and set them quietly on the counter. When I looked up, the lady's eyes met mine and held them, knowing very well what it was all about. Outside, a few cars hissing past, fog hanging like old coats between the trees. I took my girl's hand in mine for 2 blocks, then released it to let her unwrap the chocolate. I peeled my orange that was so bright against the gray of December that, from some distance, someone might have thought I was making a fire in my hands. All right. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. Have a good night.
I don't think I've ever seen a poetry encore before. Well, let's hear it for Jonathan Wickman.